middle powers must act together, because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
चुन चुन करके हिसाब लेना ये मेरी फितरत है.
Why should it be a problem? If I'm smart enough to have multiple options, you should be admiring me.
भारत झुकने वाला भी नहीं.
The rise of India will be determined by India. It will be determined by our strength, not by the mistakes of others.
The old order is not coming back. We shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Now, if you enjoy deep analysis on how global power actually works through trade, energy, supply chains, and strategic infrastructure, make sure to like and subscribe, and please don't forget to hit the bell icon. Now, let's get to today's topic. Now, at the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting, which is going on in France, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Subrahmanyam Jaishankar raised three key issues. First, the need for reform of the United Nations Security Council. And the second is improving the efficiency of peacekeeping operations. Now, you have to understand that these are very critical and very important points. Okay, we will get to it. And third is strengthening humanitarian supply chain for food, energy, and fertilizers. So you see what he's talking about. He's talking about peacekeeping operations in G7. Then he's talking about what? Supply chain for foods, energy, and fertilizer. Humanitarian supply chain for food, energy, and fertilizer. Okay. Now, but the most strategically important message was that when he spoke about the trade connectivity, he specifically highlighted the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC. And he said something very important. He said that growing instability in West Asia, meaning Middle East for lots of people, right, makes resilient trade corridors even more necessary. And the statement may sound technical, but it reveals something much bigger. And that is that India is thinking about architecture of the global trade, which is like, for India at least, which is like going back to its roots. Now, for those who don't know, okay, let me tell you something. That historically, since the dawn of the humankind, okay, if you look into it, then there were three powers that have actually dominated the globe. And these powers had dominated the globe through only one thing, and that was their navy, the maritime trade. Maritime trade was actually discovered, or say created, by India, and then later on it was further enhanced by British or Europeans, you can call, to an extent, and then of course United States. All right. So first of all, what exactly is going on, what we're going to talk about, what it is, let me share my slide real quick. Okay. So so India just turned IMEC from concept into a corridor at G7 Foreign Minister meeting. EAM External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar coupled West Asia conflict risk with India's new FTA with European Union EFTA and UK, reframing IMEC as the only viable alternative corridor. Okay, so let's understand what exactly happened at Fuji, that is in France. Okay, first of all, let's look at this. So when you look at this, these are he tweeted everything that what he did, right? So he says in the first, we shared views about IMEC at second session of the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting. The uncertainties arising from the conflicts in West Asia only make a stronger case for more resilient corridors and supply chains. Okay. At the same time, India's FTA with European Union EFTA members and UK have enhanced the utility of IMEC. Okay, what he's basically saying that all the free trade agreement that India has signed with UK, then European Union, and all other countries, it only actually enhances, or I would say expands, the value of the IMEC. That how important IMEC has become at this point after that free trade agreement. And then next he said is that debate cross cutting threats and sovereignty at G7 FM today underscored the importance of freedom of navigation for global economic security, as well as threat of narco terror linkages. On critical minerals, appreciated ongoing steps to expand cooperation along its value chain. Then also he says this, that he spoke at the G7 foreign ministers meeting session with invited partners on reform of global governance, highlighted the urgency of UNSC reforms, streamlining peacekeeping operations, and strengthening humanitarian supply chain. Specifically raised global south concern about energy challenges, fertilizer supplies, and food security. Okay, so some of these things he actually said. So what exactly is going on here, right? Now, first of all, let's talk about the IMEC part. So what's going on is that Jaishankar, basically, he was there with the invited partners and all. He connected basically two things. One was what? West Asia conflict is making existing trade routes unreliable. Any choke point anywhere, that is, whether it is Red Sea, whether it is Suez Canal, whether it is Malacca Strait, whether it is, it doesn't matter where it is. Okay, any kind of choke point actually creates more problems, and especially if it is in the West Asian region. Okay, it's a very volatile region. Okay, region. Now, India now has FTAs with the European Union, then and with the EFTA bloc and all that, right? EFTA is with the United Kingdom. So that's a significant volume of trade that needs a reliable route between India and Europe. So what he's saying is this. What he's saying is that IMEC becomes even more important. So Europe and United Kingdom should help India in building it too, and come up with a way so that we can maintain the peace in that region. And that's one way of indirectly putting something. And second thing he is saying is that, and which he's technically hinting at, is that there will be couple of new trade corridors if India has to trade with Europe. Okay, and in this whole entire mix, if you understand this, that road to Europe goes through Africa. Okay, whether you can call Africa, then there is Middle East in the between, then Horn of Africa, all that. But the way I see it is, if it's a connected landmass, then I would say, yeah, it's connected to Africa. But at the end of it all, a road to Europe goes through Africa. Okay, and there will be new corridors coming up. Okay, there is some work going on. So IMEC will be there, and then there will be a few other things that are coming up, new corridors. And one corridor will be through Algeria. Now, if you don't know, for those who don't know, or if you haven't followed the news or whatnot, then Italian Prime Minister, she was there in Algeria. I don't even remember her name right now. But what is a melody? Something. But anyways, so she was there, and she was there in Algeria for natural gas trade, to ask Algeria to give natural gas to Italy. Libya has oil. Ethiopia is the largest economy in the African continent. Sudan is a little bit volatile, but Sudan has the gold mines and all that. And Sudan is also very much influenced by the Russians and all that too. So the question is that what other trade corridors are possible? He is hinting at certain things, but I'm going to talk about that new corridor other than IMEC in a dedicated video. Okay, separate video. Probably I will publish it today or tomorrow, whenever. Okay, but it's happening. Okay, now then comes Let me share my slide 1 second. There it is. So stay with me till then, guys. This is very, very important. All right. And once it is done, then you will understand exactly where the world is headed. Okay. Now let's look at the specifics here. Okay, because this is where it's getting interesting. The Red Sea disruption isn't theoretical. We all know this thing. Houthi attacks through 2020 through 2024 cut the container traffic, right? If you look at it, right, container traffic by 50% in nearly 2024. The Suez dependent trade now faces active rerouting costs, are there, right? So ships that are rerouted basically through Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and significant costs to every voyage. And that pressure hasn't fully resolved. You have to understand this. Now, anything that happens over there in that region, that creates a major problem. So European Union, then UK, they all need all that EFTA, FTA, all that free trade, all that actually need a new route, not just one new route, but actually multiple new routes if they have to go through India. So when you look at the ancient India's trade, okay, if you when you go to look at the ancient India's trade corridor, so there were not just one trade corridor, which was incense corridor. The IMEC, used to be called incense corridor back in the day, because through this same corridor, India used to supply spices, food, and everything else to the Middle East, including water. And Middle East used to supply incense to India. That's how the trade worked. And same thing Middle East did to Europe as well. So that's why it was all called incense corridor. But anyways, that's a little bit of ancient history for you. Now, when you go look into it, you find that there are multiple corridors. India had lots and lots of ports. Actually, the whole entire peninsula was covered with the ports, deep water ports. Compared to that, then nowadays, actually, there are not that many ports actually, but that's how it used to be. So, so it's coming. You will see lots of different other things. Okay, now, so IMEC payoff. What's the benefit of having IMEC at that point? 40% faster transit versus Suez Canal at scale. Okay, IMEC's India, UAE, Israel, Europe corridor is projected to cut freight time by 40% was compared to Suez Canal. Okay, with no single point geopolitical choke point. That's the benefit of IMEC. Even though IMEC has a problem, though. Okay, IMEC has a problem because it goes to Dubai. Okay, Dubai's port, and now Dubai's port could be a choke point. You can call it a choke point. You can call it a problem because of uh, the whole Strait of Hormuz problem, right? It can be a war zone, but then again, that can be easily sorted out if UAE or some other country in that region decides to build another port that can completely avoid Gulf of Aden, or the entrance of the Gulf of Aden, or when you enter the Strait of Hormuz. So so that is a possibility if you look into it. Okay, now let's look at this. So what exactly is going on here, right? So the main important part is this, where this is not getting much of a coverage at this point, right? In a separate session, what happened in a separate session at the same meeting at G7 on global governance reform, Dr. S. Jaishankar raised the issue of UNSC reform, restructuring, peacekeeping reform, specifically the global south's vulnerability on energy, food, and fertilizer. So what does that even mean? So in the peacekeeping reform, he said that we need this to be more and more robust. And on UNSC reforms, India's take is very simple: that Security Council needs to be expanded more than, it should be more than P5, whatever that is. Now, P5 is, the countries that are part of the United Nations Security Council permanent memberships, right? So permanent seat needs to be increased. That's what India is saying. And peacekeeping wise, India said that, hey, food supplies, water supplies, all that needs to be there. And a humanitarian change should be there: food, fuel, all that. What India is pointing out is this: India is pointing out that whatever is happening in Iran, people are getting hurt in Iran. And Iran is the one that is taking the most damage at this point. So India is building a case basically that, hey, we need to provide Iranians the humanitarian aid. And what would that be? Food, water, and fuel, those supply chains and all that is needed for Iran. Okay. And that's how now I'm understanding it, that that's how India has managed to get its ship out of the Strait of Hormuz without getting in problem. Okay. And that's the pitch that is being made at the G7. Okay. And chances are that if G7 agrees to it, if France and other countries, Italy and all few other countries that are there, if they agree to it, then it's highly likely that France will allow these countries or uh, allow these countries to take their ships. Cargo ships will pass through the Strait of Hormuz without any disruption. Okay, and that's the pitch that is being made right now. So let's see what happens, though. Okay, then and then also he also talked about, as we can see right here, that Jaishankar explicitly tabled global South energy food vulnerability at a G7 table. And what is that? Because whenever there is a war like situation, fuel problems, energy problem, all that happens, then it's always the small countries. Like look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka's president actually had called India for help. That hey, how can you help us? Then Bangladesh was asking India for help over there, and they're all basically saying that hey, can you raise this issue at G7? So yeah, so India is going to raise that issue at G7. And that's how you work with your neighbors. You don't bully your neighbors saying that, hey, you can be 51st state for us. It's not like India cannot take over Bangladesh and all. They can take over, believe me. They can very efficiently, very without any problem. But then when you do that type of stuff, India hasn't taken over Bhutan even. They are just protecting Bhutan. That's about it. If they wanted to take these countries under their belt and like say 31 state, they can easily do it. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, or Bhutan, they can't do anything. They literally cannot do anything. But when you do that, then the trust that you have built up over the years, that trust is broken. And once that trust is broken, then the global community look at you differently, right? And that matters in geopolitics overall, right? So all in all, what happened is at G7 is this. G7 is actually restructuring even itself right now to the supply chain connectivity, energy, and then defense cooperation, trade cooperation, all that. So why they're doing it? See, lots of people are saying, lots of people will say that G7 is doing all this or the West is doing all that because they want to counter China. No, they don't want to counter China, actually. Reality is that they all want multiple options at this point, something that India has been talking about for quite some time. So now all these countries want multiple options because nobody wants their arm to be twisted. That nobody wants to be blackmailed for something. So Chinese, if let's say Europe, like what happened Europe when Europe became too dependent on Russia, there was a problem. Since Europe was too dependent on China, there was a problem. So now all that has to be countered. How do you counter that? You depend on India at this point. You bring India into the fold. And that's how you change the equation and dependence. So we are entering the multilateral and multipolar world. Okay, with India being at the center of it. All right, so that's how it's going to play out. And there is still G7 summit is still it's still to be scheduled and all that. But when it happens, then I'm going to talk to you guys about that as well. But for now, this is what's going on. G7 is G7. G7 is going to continue its thing. And you have to look into in G7 summit also, look into it, watch it very closely, because whatever is being said or done during that, in the summit as well, during the summit, you will see that will tell you exactly how the scene is, what the scene is. G7 is definitely restructuring itself. All right. So this is it for this video, guys. I will talk to you guys in another video. Take care.